Chapter 10 of Fundamentals of Prosperity by Roger Babson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 10, Where the Church Falls Down. Become saturated with Christ's principles. Be clean and upright. Cooperate with one another. Have faith. Serve. Trust the Almighty for the results, and you will never have to worry about property. If you will do these things, all of the others will be given to you. There are two groups of people who criticize the church. First, there are those who claim great love for their fellow men, but do not go to church because it is allied with the property interests of the community. I believe that to be the fundamental reason why the wage workers, labor leaders, socialists, and radicals are not interested in the church. They believe that the church is too closely allied with property. I have been severely criticized myself for presenting the church as a defender of property and as a means of making your home, your business, and your securities safer. Such critics are perfectly conscientious, and the church suffers much because those people, in their love for humanity, are antagonistic to the church. The second group are those defenders of property who look upon the church as impractical, who consider the Golden Rule as something all right for the minister to talk about on Sundays, but something useless to try to follow during the week. Those men criticize the church for preaching love, for talking the Sermon on the Mount, and for being what they say is impractical. So the church suffers today by having both of these groups stand off alone. Neither of them is interested in the church, the most important organization in America. It is the church which has created America, which has developed our schools, which has created our homes, which has built our cities, which has developed our industries, which has made our hospitals, charities, and which has done everything that is worthwhile in America. Yet, today, the church is the most discarded industry of all because it has not the cooperation of either of the above groups. The radical group, which claims to be interested only in humanity and not in property, and the propertied group, which frankly says that it is primarily interested in property and not humanity. It seems that we should stop sidestepping this question. Instead, we should face it squarely and answer both of these criticisms. My answer is as follows. Jesus was not interested in property per se. There is no question but that Jesus had no interest in property. These things which look so important to us, houses, roads, taxation, buildings, fields, crops, foreign trade, ships, it is very evident were insignificant to Jesus. When any of Jesus' disciples came to him to settle some property question, he pushed them aside and said he was too busy to consider it. I am sure that if Jesus were here today, he would tell us all that we are idiots for striving so to accumulate things, building ourselves bigger houses, getting bigger bank accounts and more automobiles. Hence, when the socialist or the radical or the labor leader complains to me, I frankly admit this fact. Without doubt, the church should emphasize that property of itself is of no value, and the only things worthwhile in life are happiness and the health and the freedom which come from living an upright, simple life. On the other hand, and this point I wish to emphasize just as strongly, Jesus took the position throughout his teachings that if his disciples would simply get saturated with his fundamentals, if they would be clean and upright, if they would cooperate with one another, if they would have faith to serve and trust the Almighty for the results, they would never have to worry about property. Property would take care of itself. Jesus emphasized first that they should not think of property, but he always closed his discourses by some such statement as, "If you will do these things, all the others will be given to you." It is absolutely impossible for any individual to develop the above fundamentals of prosperity, faith, integrity, industry, and brotherly kindness, without being successful. I care not whether he is a doctor, teacher, banker, lawyer, businessman, or manufacturer. That same thing is true of groups and of nations. It is fundamental law. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Those who serve will be served. Those who knock will be knocked. Those who boost will be boosted. We are paid in the coin that we give. We are forgiven as we forgive. If we are friendly, we will make friends. Statistics show that the church is the greatest factor in the worldly success of men, groups, and nations. Some readers may have seen a book written by Professor Carver of Harvard entitled The Religion Worth Having. In that book, the author discusses the various denominations of Christianity. Then he says, most conclusively, that the religion worth having, the religion that will survive, is the religion which produces the most. Yet this production will not come by seeking production per se, but rather by the development of these fundamental characteristics which have been described. Try as you will, you cannot separate the factor of religion from economic development. In the work conducted by my organization at Wellesley Hills, we study the trend of religious interest as closely as we do the condition of the banks or the supply of and demand for commodities. Statistics of church membership form one of the best barometers of business conditions. We have these figures charted back for the past 50 years. Whenever this line of religious interest turns downward and reaches a low level, history shows that it is time to prepare for a reaction and depression in business conditions. Every great panic we have ever had has been foreshadowed by a general decline in observance of religious principles. On the other hand, when the line of religious interest begins to climb, and the nation turns again to the simple mode of living laid by in the Bible, then it is time to make ready for a period of business prosperity. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11 of Fundamentals of Prosperity by Roger Babson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 11, The Future Church. The time is coming when the church will awake to its great opportunities. The greatest industry in America, but the most backward and inefficiently operated, is still in the stagecoach class. Of course, the church is very far from developed. The church is in the same position today as were the water powers 50 years ago. The church has great resources, but these resources are sadly undeveloped. From an efficiency point of view, from an organizational point of view, from a production point of view, the church today is in the stagecoach class. It holds within itself the keys of prosperity. It holds within itself the salvation and solution of our industrial, commercial, and international problems. Yet it is working, or at least the Protestant branch is open, only 3 or 4 hours a week. The church has the greatest opportunity today of any industry. It is the least developed industry, the most inefficiently operated, and the most backward in its methods. Let us shut our eyes and look ahead at what it will be 25 years from now. Let us imagine 5 churches within a radius of 5 miles, all of them now operating independently, each one open only a few hours a week. 25 years from now, these 5 churches will be linked up together under a general manager who will not be a parson, but who will be a businessman. Today, the preacher of our churches is a combination of preacher, business manager, and salesman. He is the service department, the finance department, and everything but the janitor. The church is being operated today as a college would be operated with one professor who would be president, treasurer, general manager, and everything else. The church is being operated today as a factory with simply a production man and no one to tend the finances or the sales. Manufacturers reading this book know how long a factory could be run with only a superintendent and no one to sell or finance the proposition. 25 years from today, instead of the pastor being at the head of the church and a few good people doing voluntary work, there will be 4 or 5 churches of the same denomination united under one general manager. I do not mean by this that 4 of them will be closed. They will all be open much more than they are now. But they will all be under one general manager and will be taking orders from that general manager. 25 years from today, the churches will be self-supporting. The days of begging will be over. Religion has been cheapened by singing about salvation's free for you and me. When we have our legal difficulties, we go to a lawyer and pay him. When we have a pain, we go to a doctor and pay him. If we want our children taught, we pay the price. But if we want our children instructed in the fundamentals of prosperity upon which their future depends, we send them to a Sunday school for a half-hour a week with the possibility of having them taught by a silly girl who doesn't know her work. In any event, the parent seldom takes the trouble to ascertain the quality of the teaching. The time is coming when the church will awaken to its great principles and opportunities. The greatest industry in America is still the most backward and most inefficiently operated. When these 4 or 5 churches are combined, the preacher will not have to spend half the week in preparing a different sermon every Sunday. He will have 2 weeks or a month to prepare that sermon. He will have time and have the pep and energy to deliver it to you so you won't go to sleep while sitting in the pews. The audience will then hear the same preacher only once each month, and the preacher will then have more than one congregation to appeal to. The same man is not going to be expected to preach on love, hate, the League of Nations, how to settle labor disputes, and the health of the community and every other subject. All of these men will preach the salvation of Jesus, and each one will specialize in one particular phase of the Christian life, such as faith, integrity, industry, cooperation. Then we will take more stock in our preachers because they won't pretend to know every subject. Then the preacher will not be of lesser intelligence than the average audience. 50 years ago, the ablest men in every community were the preachers, the doctors, and the lawyers. They were the only college graduates of the town and were looked up to. Today, while we pay our sales managers from $15,000 to $20,000 a year, and lawyers and doctors large fees, we pay our preachers only miserable salaries. It's a damnable disgrace to all of us. I often think that if Jesus were to come back to us, that he would take for his text that thought from the Sermon on the Mount. If you have aught against your neighbor, before you enter into your worship, go and square up. I think that when he came in to speak to us on Sunday morning, he would say, "Gentlemen, I suggest that before we have this service, we raise funds to pay the preacher a decent salary." Just before I went to Brazil, I was the guest of the President of the Argentine Republic. After lunching one day, we sat in his sun parlor, looking out over the river. He was very thoughtful. He said, "Mr. Babson, I have been wondering why it is that South America, with all its great natural advantages, is so far behind North America, notwithstanding that South America was settled before North America." Then he went on to tell how the forests of South America had 286 trees that can be found in no book of botany. He told me about many ranches that had thousands of acres under alfalfa in one block. He mentioned the mines of iron, coal, copper, silver, gold, all those great rivers and water powers which rival Niagara. Why is it, with all these natural resources, South America is so far behind North America? He asked. Well, those of you who have been there know the reason. But being a guest, I said, "Mr. President, what do you think is the reason?" He replied, "I have come to this conclusion. South America was settled by the Spanish who came to South America in search of gold, but North America was settled by the Pilgrim Fathers who went there in search of God. Friends, let us American citizens never kick down the ladder by which we climbed up. Let us never forget the foundation upon which all permanent prosperity is based. End of Chapter 11. End of Fundamentals of Prosperity by Roger Babson. This book recorded by Phil Chenevert.